Hello, everyone. This is Debra Richardson, and today I am putting the AP in Happy, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. This podcast will give a voice to accounts payable team members by talking about the growing reality of cyber attacks in their world and which vendor setup and vendor management techniques they can apply to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Are you or your team performing all possible vendor validations? Do you know which documents have the key data you need to confirm that the vendor you are about to create or update is real? Be sure by downloading the vendor validation reference list. It also has links to all the resources listed. Download at www.debra, Debra, R. Richardson, RICHARDSON.com. Today I have Diogène Ntirandekura on the podcast talking SAP and how the vendor master file is affected by and affects the purchasing, inventory, and invoice processes. He is an SAP consultant and SAP S4 Hana SME in multiple modules and gives us some insight, tips, and recommendations to have a successful migration, including how his goal is to curate a positive relationship between clients and consultants on the SAP project. Now, this will be interesting. Keep listening. Welcome to episode 82. Debra R. Richardson and Diogène Ntirandekura talk SAP S4 Hana modules and the vendor master file. Diogène Ntirandekura is the owner of ERP Happy, where he provides small and medium business IT solutions for SAP. He also hosts the Consulting Lifestyle podcast, where you will hear a combination of solo shows and exciting guest interviews on various topics such as project management, career management, entrepreneurship, becoming an independent contractor, leadership, traveling, mental health, and work balance. So welcome, Diogène. Can you tell the audience a bit about your background and pronounce your name? Because I'm not sure that I did it justice.
Thank you very much, Debra, to have invited me. It's an honor to be in a podcast in which there is the word happy. I like it. And to introduce myself to the audience. So yes, my name is Diogène Ntirandekura. In
Close.
English, it's
Close.
Okay. It's okay. In English, you could pronounce the first name Diogène. So just say it as you want it. And my background is pretty diverse. So I belong to 3 countries actually. So I am born and raised in Belgium, in Brussels. Right now, I live in Canada, in Montreal, and I am Canadian. I live in Canada since 7 years, and my roots are in Burundi, in East Africa. So, in case anyone wonders where my family name comes from, it comes from there.
And I saw you had a post on LinkedIn this weekend where you wished everyone happy Easter, and you said it in you recorded 2 versions. One was in English and one was in French. So what's your first language?
I'm a native French speaker. Yeah, that's my first language. I speak English, and I can also speak the Dutch from Belgium.
Okay.
I speak that as well. I've worked in Dutch as well. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So you speak 3 languages.
Yes, and I have a poor Kirundi, I would say. Kirundi is the language of of Burundi, but my Kirundi is pretty poor. I have to improve that.
No problem. Okay, so 4 languages, and you brought up liking my happy, and I liked yours too. ERP Happy is the name of your company. We're kindred spirits with my putting the AP in happy. So the question I have is, where did you get the name from? And can an ERP really be happy? Or better yet, can we really be happy with our ERPs?
Yes, we can all be. But to be sure that I provide a complete answer, how I got to choosing the name and how I got to the mission of the company, I will just give a, let's say, a brief summary of my career so far. So
Sure.
I have been an SAP consultant. So SAP is a management software since 2007. And I started at in Belgium at IBM. And when I started, I was part of a. It was difficult for me to understand. Actually, to be honest, it was very
Mhm.
difficult for me to understand what I was doing and what I had to do. But I was part of a data migration team, and there I was responsible of procurement and finance data. So basically, with on the procurement side, I was thinking about the vendor master,
Mhm.
purchasing information records, source lists, purchase orders, as well. Maybe I forget some other objects. And on the finance side, it was more, you had the chart of accounts, you had your cost elements, cost
Mhm.
centers, profit centers, stuff like that. And that was when actually it was, the client was from the US, but we were working from Belgium, and we also had also Chinese counterparts in China. So it was a pretty global
Yeah.
project. We even had to go to China for part of the project.
Wow.
And I stayed at IBM Belgium for almost 4 years, so
Mhm.
until 2011. And I moved. Let's say that I made a horizontal move to another one of the big consulting firm, which is Deloitte in
Yes.
Belgium.
Mhm.
And there I had a project in which I was doing the module called customer service of SAP, which is like another part. It's like the after sales or the sales of services
Mhm.
that you will do. And after that, I decided, it was fast forward, we were in 2013. I decided to move to Canada, and I had the chance to just transfer to the Montreal office of Deloitte over there, and. And there I also had, again, as an SAP consultant, and I also had the chance to do a project, and it was not in Montreal, but I had the chance to do one long project and several few short assignments in Montreal. And then I went to another small and medium business SAP consulting firm.
Mhm.
And fast forward, we are in 2007. I have almost 10 years of experience with the system. I have that itch inside myself to show more of who I am. I have that feeling that I'm not deploying all of my abilities by being so, in a way, pigeonholed in a role, even though an SAP role is pretty demanding and requires a consultant
Mhm.
to deploy a lot of skills. But still, I wanted to have kind of my voice, my way of doing things, etc. And that's why I created ERP Happy. Even though I was alone at that time, what I wanted to do is I wanted to put together a positive emotion with something very serious or very tedious. uh, so implementing an ERP, and sometimes, unfortunately, too often, working with an ERP can be, I don't want to use the word, a bad word like painful, but uh,
Do you
it's a
want to know what
task.
I
It's a
want to
task.
say? Yes, it is a task. We'll go with that.
I cannot pretend directly that all alone I would change completely the industry, but I
Mhm.
think that the relationship that users and some client companies have with ERP and ERP consultant, that relationship has to be positive. The ERP is
Yeah.
in the service of the company. It's not the opposite. So that has happened too much. So that's why I keep using my SAP experience and my SAP skills, and I also we also offer a service of ERP selection and implementation for for small and medium businesses, and still based in Montreal and still working in French, English. That's how I came to the ERP Happy.
Well, I think that's great to use your expertise in SAP and your company to bring a positive spin on that relationship when there's an ERP upgrade or you're implementing a new ERP from the AP side. When that happens, especially in the management piece of it, you're still doing your day job, and then you've got to devote some time to this huge project, especially with SAP. When that gets implemented, you're bringing everybody in, all stakeholders. It just touches all departments. And so it can be a stressful event. So I like the fact that you're trying to bring that positive spin on the consultants coming in, trying to get us to do things that we need to do, but we've got other things to do, and we're trying to juggle both. So kudos to you for bringing a positive spin to that.
Thank you.
So speaking of SAP and your SME and SAP, you've been consulting with companies implementing or upgrading SAP S4 Hana, and you specialize in the materials management module. So can you talk about what that is and what it does? Because it does touch vendor maintenance where I live.
Yeah. So I can explain indeed the materials management module. Just the little thing I will add is that I am an SME in materials management, but as well in the modules customer service and plant maintenance. And actually in French, I have unfortunately, maybe you have by chance a French listener that would be interested, but I have written a book in French about SAP customer service for it's a bit for beginners, a book for beginners. I can send you the link about it.
Send me a link and I'll put it in the show notes. That's great to know.
Yeah. Materials management. So it's a module that covers three specific actions, let's say. So we have the whole procurement and purchasing process on one side. Secondly, you have all the inventory management. And you have at the end, it's maybe a bit of a smaller part, but a key one, it's the logistics invoice verification. How I would explain it, I will put it in a process. So let's take something that is today very important in the pandemic. You want to buy masks, typically. You're a medical institution and you want to buy masks. So you will do, let's say you are a nurse and you create a purchase requisition, you for a certain amount of masks. Then to be able to create the purchase requisition, yes, you can do a text, but let's say that the best way in order to know exactly which article, to know its price, to know from which vendors we can buy it, or for which vendor we should not buy it, it's better to have what we call a material master. And a master data is typically a fixed data that you have in your system. It is not it doesn't change at every transaction. And you decide to buy that material, and then that material is procured from a vendor, and to buy it from a vendor, to have that binding document with the vendor, it is the purchase order that is created and that is sent for a certain quantity, for a certain date, and to be received at a certain location. And the particularity with that, and I know that we will speak about the vendor master, is that when you as a company, when you communicate with the vendor master, you can talk to different entities according to to the operations that you do with the vendor. So you can, for the same vendor master, you can procure from a certain address. You can be invoiced by another by another address. You can have with the same vendor, you can also have the role of manufacturers as well. And I think that there is a fourth possible role. the ordering address, the invoicing party, maybe the goods recipient. I don't want to blow something, but I think there is a fourth one.
Yeah. And you could probably attest to this too. Everyone has customized their own version of SAP as to what they see when they do their partnering and they go into their business partner, what relationships and what types of roles they can add. So,
Indeed. And so basically, I was going about the different partner functions of the vendor. So so if we stay in the story, we have purchased the mask, then the supplier will send over the mask, and we will receive them. And to receive them, we need to have in place different as well, again, different master data, different organizational structure in SAP. So you will have the physical office, which will be created as a plant in the system that will receive the goods. And when you receive the goods and you want to move them within your premises towards the area where the nurse can pick the mask for her work. And by the way, congratulations and thank you for all the healthcare providers today. Yes. You need to do what we call goods movement. And those goods movements happen between different organizational entities within your hospital or within your medical institution, and that will also be represented in SAP. And those goods movement is part of the inventory management part. So we have done the procurement, purchasing, we have received. Now we are in inventory management. Okay. And after that, after we have received, we can the vendor will invoice us. And what we will want to do is that the vendor will send the invoice, but we want to know that if we have purchased 1,000 masks, we want to be sure that we have received 1,000 masks, so that we pay for the 1,000 masks.
Right.
And basically that's how a typical process would be finished, would be done. But of course there are a lot of variations, but I'm talking about the most common process. So materials management, purchasing, inventory management, and invoice verification.
So in that process with the purchasing, inventory, and then the invoice piece of that, what do you find as you're working with companies that is like the biggest pain point? And then what do you recommend to resolve it as you're consulting with clients?
Usually, we've mentioned two things. I think material master and vendor master. So all the settings, all the values that we put in those two objects have a huge impact on the process, and they can, if we don't think about it carefully enough. And maybe if we put too much as well data into it, we can be handicapped, or we can have issues afterwards. So I have seen different types of issue. The first, but the most common one is really the material master itself. Okay. So for example, things such as the unit of measure that you put in your material master, when your unit of measure could be different than the unit with which you purchase the item, but normally the base, the common unit of measure should be the lowest, like the lowest common denominator. And sometimes I've seen clients putting a base unit of measure that is let's say higher than other unit of measure, and then it becomes strange the way you want to purchase your equipment or your material. So you start to purchase commas of material, 0, something, and it becomes. I have seen that. What I have seen as well is having a clear policy in terms of purchasing approvals. What I've seen more is people putting too much of that. Actually, it's not that you don't have an approval policy, but it's putting the limit so low that it cripples the operations.
Okay.
So it's very important when we make decisions during an implementation to see, okay, what is the practical, what will, in practice, what will be the consequence?
Yeah.
So that's kind of when people can be unhappy with their ERP, because they will be like, oh, in the past I was able to buy for $100 of supplies, and that's not a big
Mm-hmm.
deal. But now the system blocks me. I have to wait for my boss, but my boss is on holiday. Only two people have the role to be able to do that, etc. You know.
Yeah,
That type of
and I
thing.
agree with you on that. When you put the thresholds too low where you're requiring too many approvals, it just takes too long to get anything done. And people get fed up with it because they have to continually come in to approve something. Do you find that those that put in too many approvals come back to you and say, hey, yeah, we shouldn't have done that? Can you reverse all of that?
Indeed. So that
Yeah,
can happen. Then
yeah.
you also have a classic one as well, is with
Hmm.
the relationship between the material and the vendor.
Yeah.
So we don't really monitor too much the activity with the vendor. If the performance of the vendor is that up to the level that we want it, we don't really know. We just buy.
Hmm.
We just keep buying and keep buying from any vendor. And
Yeah.
sometimes as well, that can be a disadvantage for a company if you're not careful enough about the uh, really monitoring what your vendor does. Also, I've seen the underuse of the purchasing information record, which
Hmm.
is a master data as well, but that links the material and the vendor master. And you can have beneficial conditions, pricing conditions or delivery conditions with a
Hmm.
vendor with regard to a specific material. So sometimes an opportunity is also lost there. Otherwise, you have also the classic thing, and unfortunately, it happens. That's also part of your
Hmm.
specialization. Is the vendor fraud? You don't really check duplicate invoices.
Yeah.
You don't do the proper due diligence with regards to your vendors. When you
Yeah.
create the vendor master, the description is like with abbreviations. That's not a
Yeah.
legal. That's not a legal.
Yeah.
Uh, Talking about languages as well,
Hmm.
you have to be careful as well.
Yeah.
The language in which you create the vendor. So all of those things can be a problem. So.
So I've worked in SAP ECC 6, and I had vendors at that time. As a matter of fact, we had a couple of instances of SAP, which is probably not uncommon. And I left just before the upgrade of S4 Hana. So what I really lived in was the ECC6. And one of the things that I found that was beneficial to do on my team, to your point, was to standardize, how we entered in the legal name and make sure that everyone was doing it the right way. I know that was a big thing. And then I also know that there were some issues with like three-way match.
Yeah, trio match is. I mentioned it a bit before. Really
Hmm.
matching what you purchased, what you have
Right.
received, with what you're supposed to pay on the invoice. It happens. It's not uncommon. It is
Yeah.
not uncommon, and it's mostly with the receipt. So it can happen that your supplier will send maybe both pretty much at the same
Hmm.
time, or or he send the invoice before you have received the goods. Be
Hmm.
careful. Be sure that even if the invoice maybe it's a low amount, uh, always be sure that you have received everything that is on the invoice. And what is good is that with SAP you can enforce that. With the standard SAP you can enforce that three-way match.
Oh,
Or
great.
if you buy services, you can be a two-way match as well. So
So I mentioned before that I worked with ECC6, and then just before I left, the company was moving to SAP S4 Hana, which is your
aha.
expertise. For those that are moving from a different ERP or a different ERP version, what do you recommend that they do to prepare for SAP S4 Hana so that they don't experience, some of the pain points that we just talked about? Is there anything that as you work with clients that can make your and their process easier?
So the process of migrating to S4,
Yeah.
I can where I can be talk as an expert is maybe more on the business side, the
Mm-hmm.
functional solution side, because there is a whole technical aspect of that, because migrating to S4 HANA is migrating to a platform that is which has a higher performance, can handle more data at the same time and faster. So that's
Okay.
the first thing. And you can migrate just on the platform. You don't change anything in terms of materials management, and maybe you
Okay.
can change just your finance. You could have just finance on S4 HANA and the rest on the same.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have sorry, it's a jargon. You can migrate on HANA,
Okay.
HANA, which is the platform. But
Yep.
then when you're in S4, S4 simplified, uh, then when you're on S4, then you have the functional solutions that is being simplified.
Ah,
And
okay.
the materials management module is very much impacted by it, because you have a drastic I cannot give you the exact number, but you have a drastic reduction in terms of the number of tables that you will have. In terms of goods movement, I think it's reduced to like something like 5 tables, a very low number
Oh, wow.
of tables that you will have. So for there is quite a bit of change as well. One of the key changes is the fact that the vendor master, the customer master, and the employee master, they all become a business partner.
Yes, I do
And
remember that.
yeah.
So that's probably a question that everyone that's moving from ECC6 to SAP S4 HANA, that if they haven't made the decision, they're pondering. And if they have already made the decision, they probably took a while to get to it.
Yeah, the thing is that you don't have to if you have the Coca-Cola company, it's both your
Yeah.
supplier and your customer. You don't have to create it completely from scratch twice. You have
Yeah.
those general data that are one and the same, but you actually don't lose things, because you have different types of business partners, and then you have
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden you have that customer type with all the different partner functions that we usually can have with the customer master, and you have the vendor type with the partner functions that we used to have within the vendor master. I think it is. I personally think that it is a very good move by SAP.
Here's a couple of things that we needed to make sure that we understood. So I know that there's a general, and in that general, there's an address that is shared between the customer and the vendor. And then there's also banking that is shared between the customer and the vendor. And we didn't have, this may be different for others, but we didn't have a separate like master data management group that handled both the customer and the vendor. We had the AP team that handled the vendors, and then we had a totally different group that handled the customers. So the question was, do we bring all that together and have it on the same record? And how do we share that general address? And then how do we share the banking? Because the banking could be different on the customer side than it is on the vendor side. And it's
Exactly.
all sensitive information. Who's going to get access to that? And so, yeah, those were some questions. And I know if anyone's in the throes of implementation, upgrading from ECC to SAP S4 HANA, they're probably or have gone through the same questions, determining if that's going to be the same record or if they're going to leave it separate.
You can so you have, as you said, the general information, like the name, the name and the address, and then you will have the number, the business partner number, and with that same number, then when you have the sales part, all the customer customer part, customer information, you can still have the same team handling that, and then you will still have your accounts payable team handling the procurement procurement side. But of course, they will have way more interaction, because then you cannot just decide to
Right.
change the name or
Yep.
change the address, because
Yep.
it will impact absolutely all
Yep.
the processes.
And
But
that was
one
the big
point,
question. Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, it will impact everybody. And one point that you bring up that is very important. It's the governance of the data. And
Mm-hmm.
in the S4 Hana project that I have been involved with, is I was not the governance consultant myself, but there was a consultant doing what is called master data governance. And this is becoming a standard within the S4 HANA implementation, is that you have someone or a team
Different group.
that
Yeah.
has the expertise of putting in place a master data governance solution, and that helps for objects such as the business partner. That is key.
Yeah.
That is key
So,
for that. So yeah.
so that one group then handles both the customer side and the vendor side of that business partner, which would make it easier.
And could be also because the employee becomes a business partner as well, so it could be the employee as well. So there could be also some
Yeah.
HR. Yeah,
Wow.
indeed.
And I'm sure that they can be trained to make sure that, when you get in vendor change requests for like banking, that they can apply the same authentication or internal controls, best practices to make sure that they're not changing a vendor's banking to fraudulent banking, because then now that affects the customer. And then it could also affect the employee as well.
Yeah, you still have, you had as I said, when I started my career, I was doing also a vendor master, and I remember I had to create a bank master or something like that. And you still have those country,
That's never clean.
Yeah, it was funny because and honestly, it was a project where the client was a chemical company. The global headquarters were in the US, but we were making an implementation that started for China, and we had a mainland China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and data were written in the Chinese calligraphy, so Mandarin, Cantonese, and what was called the traditional Chinese for Taiwan. So honestly, whatever was loaded, I could only trust the person that it was good. I will only know some numbers, and that was it.
Wow. Okay. So you didn't learn that real quick. Add that to your list of languages, Mandarin.
No. But the bank, the bank information, besides maybe the name or the address that was in a specific calligraphy, you have the bank key that is a global that's a global standard. Swift code, it's a global standard. IBAN, and you have those checks that are put in the system. So if you put a fraudulent bank, it has to be an existing one, but then it will be the wrong owner.
Correct. Yeah. Speaking of that, in doing like implementations, upgrading. So I know I've gone through a few of those in the past, especially with SAP, and there's a lot of cleanup projects. So I know we had the bank table on there, but I don't know if we ever got to it. I don't think we ever got to it, because that was huge. And I know that needed some cleanup. We also had cleaning up the vendor master file, which for the most part, we had already standardized what we were doing, but there was some historical data on the vendor record that we inherited from, the previous teams. And so we had that clean vendor master, or to review the vendor master files for inactive, duplicate vendors, and then complete the standardization on those inherited vendors. So do you find that with implementation with SAP that it's easier to start with a clean vendor master file?
Actually, a clean data, or
Data.
maybe I will disappoint you, but clean data is more dependent on the customer team, and the work, of course, the work of the consultant. But what I want to say is that SAP will not clean up your data.
Yeah, we know that. I wish.
There is a how do we say that? There is a saying garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
So if you put the wrong data, it will be wrong in SAP, and it will just do the wrong thing. So that's a huge opportunity sometimes that is wasted,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, and that can also make people unhappy with their ERP. Is that the the processes are redefined or well designed, well
Mm-hmm.
documented, but the data cannot follow. So if you don't have the data, you just
Yeah.
cannot apply the proper processes, and that's a huge that very often that's a huge opportunity that is missed. I mean, SAP projects are very often 8-figure
Yeah.
projects, so
Yeah.
uh, but let's better do it with clean data, and that's usually an exercise that you start early in the implementation. You don't do it while you are testing and
Right.
you are about to go live a few months before. No, you really think about it a long time before. So what I have seen, or what are
Mm-hmm.
good practices is, you just said, okay, we had to clean up the vendors. So when you say clean up the vendors, what do we mean? So if you have Toyota Corporation as a vendor, if someone writes Toyota Corp and someone else writes Toyota and then Toyota Corporation, you have maybe 3 vendor masters that
Yeah.
are actually one and the same.
Yes.
And very often you also have companies with separate systems, and they will describe the vendors with separate names
Mm-hmm.
as well. So maybe we have to choose which of the legacy system will be the leading system via which we will make or start to build our clean master file. The other thing is you have to make important business decisions, and I know they are not easy. As a client, it's not easy. Sometimes I have often seen people, even people with pretty big responsibilities, being hesitant about putting in place some cleaning policies such as
Mm-hmm.
uh, I will not create in SAP any vendor with whom I have not done business in the past 3 years.
Yeah.
So sometimes that kind of decision, you're just afraid to have just that one vendor that should have been there, and you forgot it. Um, so a policy with regards to how the vendors are named,
Yeah.
it can sound so basic, but sorry, if you have people that are used to work for years with a certain ERP or a certain software. Sometimes change can be difficult, and it requires some change management. You also have to or with regards to vendor master, you have to be very clear about what you put in your purchasing data, because they drive a lot of things.
Yeah.
So you can put the stuff to, for example, you want to have a automated invoicing, like with ERS. You want to look at the purchase info record for a price. You have also things related to transportation, I think, as well over there. So you have to think about the decisions that you put inside
Yeah.
the views of the vendor master. And
Mm-hmm.
with S4 HANA, you still have
Yeah.
those things. You still have a purchasing organization and purchasing organization data
Yeah.
as well with your vendor. So, but cleaning is not dependent on the ERP. Honestly,
Yeah.
it's
It
the
should
the
be done
format.
anyway.
The format of the cleaning will be
Yeah.
dependent on the ERP, but not the content.
And you brought up something too that we had not talked about, but it's common. And it's the fact that with some of these implementation projects, especially for SAP S4 HANA, you're upgrading or implementing and you're combining multiple systems, not just SAP, but you could be combining PeopleSoft, Oracle, other systems that you're also using as a result of acquisitions. You inherit whatever they have, or you've got a certain business that's in an ERP or a accounting system that was customized just for what that business needs. So, you hang on to it. And before you know it, at one point, I had 5 ERPs, and then there was an acquisition and we did a lift and shift. And so there were 7 ERPs. And now you've got, all of those, scheduled to go into SAP S4 Hana. So looking at that vendor master file, and yes, you have the same vendor in multiple ERPs because that vendor is doing business with your particular entity that's in that ERP. So now you've got multiple records for that same vendor, and they're all going to meet right at SAP S4 Hana. So that cleanup is not only within each ERP, but it's also between different ERPs as well. And I know that was something that was always on the list. And I could just speak for AP teams out there. We know that we need to clean our vendor master files. We know we need to sync them across all of the ERPs that we have. We just don't have time to do it. They're on the list. It's on the list to do. Sometimes we do. And the biggest piece of that is because in some of these ERPs, it's just a manual process, especially SAP, because you've got the partnering going on. And so it's just a manual process to do the review. We might be able to go in there and do the XK99 and, put company code blocks, purchase order blocks, that type of thing, mark them for deletion, but there's still that review to be done.
I'll just say one thing that
Yeah.
I have to say it during the episode is that with regards to the migration to S4 HANA, for anyone in the audience that is hesitating about it, in case you don't know, the SAP will end its support for ECC in 2025. So that's why there will be, there is already a wave of migration from ECC to S4 HANA.
So 2025, huh?
Yeah, the support for ECC will be finished.
Sounds like there needs to be a lot of cleanup done, folks. So if you're on ECC, start now, right, Diogène?
Exactly.
Start now.
Exactly, and you have to start early as well. Yeah. Then on another side of the migration, that's not related to data. It's also what does S4 look like, or what does it mean to be on HANA on such a faster platform. There are simulation tools that can help you to kind of have a real life experience of what it is to work with S4. So you can run scenarios, typical logistics or manufacturing scenarios that are executed within an S4 HANA sandbox, and you have everybody, every role that is represented that has to act with regards to executing the process. And you also have a better look and feel about the S4 HANA solution. For example, also one of the other aspects is the look and feel, the GUI. So we have the traditional GUI meaning graphical user interface. We have that kind of light blue screen, but now the standard is to go to Fiori screens as well. So that's also another change.
So on that note, do you provide, like when you're working with clients, does SAP or do the consultants or whoever's running the implementation provide sandboxes for the clients so they can get in there and see what it's like? Because it is different.
Yeah. One key is to differentiate the before and during the implementation. So during the implementation, the client has already purchased the licenses.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, they have some access to a sandbox. So usually, as consultant, we are working on the sandbox of the client.
Mm-hmm.
If it is before the project, before any contract has been signed, before any license has been purchased, yes, there is a possibility for your consultant or the consulting company. They have access to a demo system, and they can make some proof of concept for the clients. But during the project, the license is already purchased, and within that license for the implementation, the client has access to sandboxes. That's what is used.
All right. So what else do we want to talk about with SAP?
We can go on for hours.
I was gonna say, not quite getting a headache yet over it, but yeah, I definitely am having flashbacks now. So glad to have an SAP SME in some of the modules on the podcast today.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So if any of the listeners want to get some more information on ERP Happy, or maybe, want to reach out to you to talk about SAP, where can they go?
Yeah, they can go on three places. So my personal LinkedIn profile. So with my name, very easy name to remember.
I'll put it in the show notes. I'll put it in the show notes.
So that on DM on my LinkedIn profile is one thing, or directly on ERPhappy.com. So info at ERPhappy.com. I am also we are pretty responsive there. That's for the ERP services and SAP services. And for the podcast, if anyone wants to listen to it, is Consulting Lifestyle. So just a little bit of promo about the podcast. Mm-hmm. So it's really about B2B consulting. At the start of the episode, I was saying that I did not understand too much what I was doing during my first project, and it's a little bit for that type of people that may don't really know what is consulting, or just starting consulting and want to understand it a little bit better. I interview brilliant people such as Debra, Richardson, and other people to share their experience, share their stories, share their business model, etc. And it's interviews that last like about 45 minutes. Otherwise, you can also contact me on the website consultinglifestyle.fm, and there is the email address info@consultinglifestyle.fm.
All right. And I'll put all of that in the show notes so that they can just click and get right to you. So I do appreciate you coming on the podcast, talking about SAP. Love it. Maybe we'll have you back on sometime.
Yes, I will be very happy. And if any person wants to talk about SAP, I will be very happy to discuss it as well. Thank you very much, Debra. It was a great experience.
Thanks, Diogène. Hey guys, we are not done yet. Take a listen to the clip that Diogène just sent me with a bonus for you.
Dear audience of the Putting the AP in Happy podcast, I have really enjoyed recording this episode with Debra Richardson. First of all, Debra is really a lovely person, very motivated professional, and I am sure her audience reflects also the kind of person that she is. And it was very interesting to talk about Vendor Master in the context of SAP, knowing that we have this context in which in the next years it will be important for companies to migrate from ECC to S4 Hana. And there is maybe one piece of information I would like to specify, is that the migration from ECC to S4 Hana, the cutoff date for it has been recently moved. It was earlier, it was mentioned 2025, but actually it will be 2027, and in some cases 2030. Of course, in order to have the up-to-date information, you really have to inquire yourself directly with SAP. On the second note I would like to say is that even though I talk about it in the little bonus that I will explain, the partner functions related to Vendor Master. So we have the partner to which we do the ordering address. We have the partner to which we send the invoice, the invoicing party, and in case we do returns, or in case we do subcontracting, we will have the goods recipient at the vendor. And then the fourth is actually the person or the entity, to which we pay the invoice, and that's the payee, basically. And now let's go with the bonus. So the bonus that is provided especially for you, and that is directly available on the website of Putting the AP in Happy, meaning the website of Debra Richardson, is an explanation of the main changes and the main things that will remain the same when you migrate your vendor master from ECC to S4 HANA. And of course, as mentioned during the episode, there will be some explanation about the business partner. So I really hope you will enjoy this piece of information that will be available. And I am looking forward to your comments and your feedback, either to Debra or directly to me. Thank you very much. It was an honor to be a guest on the show, and I hope to discuss with you and interact with you very soon. Diogène Ntirandekura from ERP Happy.
Wasn't that great? Head on over to my site, DebraRRichardson.com, and check out that blog post. Thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Diogène talking SAP on the 82nd episode of the Putting the AP in Happy podcast, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Don't forget to check the show notes for the links mentioned in the podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing and writing a review of my podcast on the platform that you use to listen. Stay happy.